All right, welcome back, everybody. We are going to go ahead and move on in the agenda. So, Katerina, go ahead and take it away.
So our next and final presentation for today's session is an update by the Usability Subteam. Proposal for surfacing backend configuration settings presented by Noah, Lasley, Susannah Broyles, Kelly Kress, and Brian Zelip. We're asking people to introduce themselves and give a short bio as they come along in the presentation.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Let me get my screen uh, here. Okay. So I'm here on behalf of and with the whole usability sub team today to present an update on some work we've been doing for about the last year and a half. And I'll let everyone introduce themselves just as they come in, but I wanted to upfront Nick Pavlik. He's going to be taking notes for us at the end, so he may not have a speaking role. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce him as well. He's on the usability sub team. But here's our overview for what we're going to do. But the project that we've been working on for the past year or so has to do, well, let me back up. The usability sub team is charged with developing functional and practical recommendations for streamlining navigation, enhancing the ease of use and efficiency, and clarifying the visual layout of the ArchivesSpace software application as a whole. And what we've been working on for the past year or so has to do with something that's really at an intersection of all three of those. And that specifically is working with these configuration settings files that are in the back end of the application, and you have to have sysadmin privileges to edit these. And what we're proposing or have been thinking about a way to do for the past year or so is how to surface those to actually get them into the staff user interface of the application so that advanced level users of the application can actually make those changes for themselves as opposed to having to contact their sysadmin or go in the back end and make those changes. So as we were talking about this and thinking about how to do this really kind of kicked off in earnest with a discussion last April. We had a community discussion, and as part of that discussion, I sent on a survey beforehand to try to gauge the community's interest level in certain ones of these configuration settings that we thought might be good, or just amongst ourselves had decided that would be good to try to target. And so this is the results of that data. We're trying to make decisions that are based on what the community actually wants. And so these are some of the settings on the left, and then the responses are over on the right-hand side. So there were 8 of those possible configuration settings that we used for the pre-discussion and got some good feedback on. And then during the discussion itself, we did another live survey or did a live survey during the discussion to try to we identified a few more configuration settings that might be of interest to try to surface for this project. And so we asked about 6 of those, and the feedback for those is here. And last October, so this year, we've been working on kind of fleshing out what these configuration settings would actually, what the developers need to actually make these changes, if they were to make these changes and put them in the staff user interface, what kinds of things they need. So what kinds of elements, what kinds of values these would be, and the tooltips, things like that. So as we were working on that, we were lucky enough to meet with the technical lead and front-end developer and go through these settings, setting by setting, and determine the feasibility of what's actually possible. Unfortunately, the first two settings that we were looking at as we got in to see what all these configuration setting files, what else in the application they touch. The first two were eliminated as like, maybe not right now. That's a pretty complex change. But the ones that are highlighted in pink were given kind of like, okay, these look like this would be feasible, and this is a realistic change that might be able to get pushed through. So those in pink are what we've been working on this year. And same with the live survey, we did the same thing. And so we've identified 6 out of 14 that we're trying to push forward this year in the live demo. And that is what we're going to see now. I will turn it over to Brian.
Thanks all. Hi, good afternoon, good morning. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Zelip, and I'm the front-end developer with the ArchivesSpace program team, and I've been working with the usability group, as Noah's said. And I'm going to share my screen here and show some of those. What we've been doing here essentially is making this page right here. Here's a URL we can all go to. This is a live server that's online in fig.leartech.org/staff, and it has the same login information as everything else. And what's new here under the system menu is this manage PUI settings option here in the dropdown. So here is a mockup that's essentially turning some of the way that the changes used to be made in the configuration options to porting it here into the staff, one of the staff forms, so that we can quickly update it. And just to kind of see what some of these options looked like before. So, for example, here, this default page size, right? So oftentimes if folks want to bump that number up, they would have to go to somebody maybe in the IT office, and they would have to restart the servers and update this file to maybe say, I don't know, 20. We want our results to be 20 results long. So that's one of the kind of things that we can change. So what we see right here, for example, is here's one such setting for how long can an abstract note length be. So whatever the default is in that file that we see there, on a fresh instance, this would kind of pop up and the default value would be here. And then folks can just change that to say 1000 or something, and then save it. And then that's taken care of. When Noah mentioned a few of the settings that we had to pass on, especially in this first round, it's because there's a lot more complex stuff going on. Even when we see this, what we see here, which tabs are on the main horizontal menu. And so what that's dealing with, let me just get to that. What that's dealing with is, what's here on the public app. And so the way that one of the parts of how we configure this is on this page right here in this config file, and we edit these values. So what we're doing essentially is changing Boolean values from true to false. We do that a lot. And we put other things in, like when we enable help configuration. This is one of the configuration options that's behind many of the tooltips that we see, especially in the front end, the staff application. And so here's where we can configure it, and not just a Boolean value, but some string, that's some URL in this case, about where these tooltips should go or point to. And so that's the kind of thing that lends itself well, especially sort of as this low-hanging fruit, that things can be just changed, and there's minimal amount of restarting on the server that's needed. And so the logic, what we see here, is not actually functioning. This is just a user interface mock-up of what the design might look like. And it's still obviously a work in progress. But these are the things that we have identified, the settings that we have identified that should be able to be configured from right here in the staff application. And again, folks can see this because this is a live server, config.leartech.org/staff. And we have added this new setting to the system menu because we felt it was, excuse me, akin to sort of the OAI PMH settings page, for example, because this is a new type of setting that doesn't necessarily belong into these menus, the preference menus, because it doesn't deal with the staff application. This is only dealing with public application settings. And we're always happy for questions and more, but now I'll turn it back over. I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to Noah.
Great, thanks for that demo, and let me turn it over. Let me start this slide deck again, and I'll turn it over. Here we go.
So from this work, our next step is to translate our findings into a series of actionable development tickets. Because we've done this groundwork to clearly define the issues and opportunities, we can move directly from research to implementation. That puts us in a strong position to make really targeted, well-informed feature requests that can be acted on efficiently. And Kelly, if you want to continue this.
Sure. I'm Kelly Kress. I'm Senior Accessioning Archivist at Huntington Library, and we do plan to address most of these settings suggested via the pre-event survey and the live survey in kind of a second phase of this work. And as Noah mentioned earlier, there are a few settings that were eliminated due to some technical complexities or other issues. And the enabling custom reports is one that may also not be feasible as a configuration file change, but you can definitely look for the rest of these in the future. And while our work focused now on the PUI, most of these remaining settings are going to be for the staff interface. So we'll be putting our attention towards that in the very near future.
So what we're hoping to do now is just open the floor for any discussion, questions, comments you might have. I got the slide deck going. If comments come in, can somebody else on the sub team read them out, and we'll try to tackle them as they come in. But we also have some questions for you if the chatter is pretty quiet. So I'll be quiet for a second and see what y'all have to say.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, we already have questions in the Q&A, so I don't know if you're going to be able to ask us anything. Valerie asked, just to confirm, these would apply without a restart? See Brian nodding.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
Brian's going to take the technical ones.
Yep, that's correct.
Dan asked the same question. All right. 2 questions, 1 answer. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I guess you can ask us those questions, Noah. If you want to go ahead and do that. See, anytime I start talking and transitioning, Ashlyn asked, would there be a certain level of user permissions required to make the changes since it would affect the whole PUI?
Yeah, that's right. There's definitely a whole permissions piece to this, and that's I think still to be figured out. But that's definitely going to be part of some of the ticket content, some of the questions around the discussions that all this work sort of leads to. But yes, permissions will definitely be applying here. Maybe there'll be one new one for this. Can manage public app settings or something, for example.
Thanks. Yeah. Valerie, is this limited to a permission level? Yeah, same answer, Valerie. Wow, you guys are all on the same wavelength. Jennifer asks, when will this be available?
Right. Well, the tickets in the future, we're just about to release V4.2.0, so go check it out if you can. And so another release this year. I mean, it's possible towards the end of the year we can have some of this functionality implemented. that sure would be awesome to see. But the next step is what we're focused on, and that is getting these tickets all written up. And we're sort of hitting the ground running here with this mock-up. So it'll be an interesting example of sort of writing tickets, that have a lot of detailed, rich information in it. And we'll go from there. So stay posted. I will also mention real quick that the Tech Docs website has a blog now, and this is the kind of thing that we will be posting on that blog for a channel for sort of technical updates. And you can see that at docs.archivespace.org.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, this is very much a work in progress, and keep an eye out for those opportunities to provide feedback on this process as well, because usability's been really thoughtful about this work, and there's some cool stuff in here. Anton asks, what are some of the determining factors for how feasible a PUI integration of an admin level setting is?
Go ahead, Noah. Something about, if you can repeat that first part, but it looks like Noah had a response too.
I have something to say on the other one, but you go ahead and answer this one, and I'll jump in a second.
Okay, so I'll repeat. The question that I just asked was, what are some of the determining factors for how feasible a PUI integration of an admin level setting is?
Admin level setting. Oh, right. Well, I'm not sure of the details on that, but what I do know is that there's been a lot of work in that regard already. There's even sort of some draft PR work, I think, up on GitHub on our repository by longtime ArchivesSpace member Laura, who recently has joined back our team as a developer on ArchivesSpace, Laura Woodford. And this is something that she's been working on and thinking about quite a bit. And so I'm going to defer stuff like that to her. But while we're on this call, I'll try to find a link to that particular PR, because that's interesting stuff for sure. The short answer is it's certainly possible. The long answer is it's ArchivesSpace, and we got to make it work.
No, I know you want to go back to the other question, but Anton says, sorry, I meant staff user interface, not public user interface. I don't know if that changes the answer to your question, though.
Got it. Yes, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And what I do know, that's one thing that's come from this discussion that we had here, that this work here is based on, which is, what are some real pain points in the community? And permissions are one of those real big ones. And so permissions are kind of exciting. I understand it's been a long time coming. There's been a long-standing challenge that permissions have provided. The development team and the program team as a whole is in a real good shape right now, sort of stronger than we've been in quite some time. And I wouldn't be surprised if permissions is something that our current team tackles in the future. So stay tuned for that too.
Yeah, regarding the timeline question a little bit earlier, I wanted to say from the usability subteam perspective, writing these up as really detailed, and hopefully we want to, as the usability subteam, we're going to try to write these up as tickets that are actionable for the developer, so that as the lift on their end is hopefully lessened by the work that we're doing here, and having Brian meet with us hopefully will help. But our priority will be getting as many of these tickets submitted by the end of this term, and then next term we'll follow them. But I hope to keep updating you. I have one more year on usability, and I hope we have another update to share before my term on the sub team is over.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. This is very cool, and it's been a lot of work to put it together. So, and usability's been great about taking on these big projects like this. I have another question from Valerie, but Valerie also has in the chat. So I'll before I get to the question, I'll give the compliment. Valerie says, this is very cool. Compliments on the hard work to usability and Brian. And then Valerie asks, if an instance already has a plugin doing the same thing, do these changes load before or after plugins?
These changes, I think what you're asking is the changes that we have settings for. When you change those, do they load before or after the plugin? The answer is definitely before. It's raw, it's base level. So if you have plugins that do this, get rid of them. That's one less thing you have to maintain.
Nice, Brian. Thanks. We're all caught up on the Q&A. I don't know, Noah, maybe now is a good time to ask those questions that you have for us.
Sure. Let me start with saying, in general, I'm curious. Our process for this has kind of been try to share with the community what it is we think we're trying to do. Try to get some kind of data points that either confirms or denies we're going in a direction that the community has appetite for, and then recommend these changes in a way that is more as a sub team. We're able to give a lot of consideration, kind of put our heads together. And so I guess my question is, what do y'all think about this process? And is there, if there are other usability issues that would lend themselves to this style of thing, I'd love to hear those, having seen this.
You may have just opened a can of worms with that question, Noah. But people are definitely playing around with the test, I think, because in the chat we've got, this is fantastic. I think these changes are really cool. So yeah, if anyone wants to provide any other initial feedback or initial, but what about this other thing? Please feel free, though it is really cool. So I don't want to take away from the work that's already been done by saying that.
While we're waiting, I'll say what the technical challenge that's yet to be figured out is how do we pass messages between the two applications? There's already sort of some examples of that, but that's sort of the technical path that lies ahead of figuring that thing out, so that we don't have to restart the application. So that's kind of what the next big step is too. That'll be tickets that'll be in addition to the tickets that are coming from our process here.
Thanks. Makes sense. We do have one suggestion. Anton asked about pagination length.
Pagination links or pagination length, yes. That was interesting. We don't really see it on this on the demo, do we? I'm sort of surprised by that. If it's not there for sure, that's something that we should be able to just do, although maybe there's a reason for that. I mean, I shouldn't speak too quickly. We do have a whole bunch of notes with all the reasoning sort of behind why we made the decisions that we made. So I'll check that out. But I would be surprised if that pagination one, it has to do with search, I don't know. So maybe there's something going on there potentially, but it's also possible that could be on the list too, because I sort of expected to see it at the drop of a dime here, but I didn't.
Tara, and I don't know what's in scope or not, but I'm just going to start reading about enhancements people are putting in the chat. One enhancement I'd like to see in the application itself is a cart-like function, so users can save things they want to request and then they send them to us. So for smaller institutions that aren't using something like Aon, which can be integrated with ArchivesSpace.
Yeah, I can't speak to the technical feasibility, but I will say we have a sub-team member that's taking notes, and I hope that we will just have a stash of these things, ideas that we've gotten from discussions. We have some from last time, and that our discussion last April that has informed some of how we've gone about this year. So I hope that we can just kind of log these things and as we get work pushed through, there's a just a pile somewhere that we can have that we know this came from this discussion and could be a topic that we explore in the future. So yeah, thank you for any suggestions you have.
Don't worry, Noah. There's a pile of suggestions. There's always something we can find.
So while we're waiting, what does Aeon or Eon do?
Aeon is more for circulation management. I think what Tara wants is something instead of a person hitting the request functionality and sending you 15 emails for individual items or individual boxes, they would send you one single email with a list of everything you want if you're not using a circulation management function like that. Zeph just dropped into the chat how to request a new feature. That's a great link to drop right now, Zeph. So yeah, if there's something that ArchivesSpace doesn't do that you're interested in that isn't necessarily within the scope of the discussion we're having, you can always submit a feature request and it can make its way through the development prioritization workflow that we have. Noah, do you have any other questions for us while we're waiting for the community to pop in?
Look at my list. I think I mean that was the big one was just this process. I personally, as chairing the usability, it was helpful to have something kind of that had been started last year, and then this process seems to take. I mean, it's a slow process, but hopefully considered. And I'm just curious, any feedback on this process as far as some kind of discussion, less formal than this setting maybe, but some kind of discussion where there's some kind of survey beforehand, and then I'm all about making community data driven decisions when we can, and so anything that the usability subteam can do to collect actual data on what users might like to see. I love feedback on that specific.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think one great example of that actually is some work that usability spearheaded before, which is around multilingual content in the application. And the subteam did a lot of surveying and hosted some forum sessions like this and a feedback session, and then ultimately that work transitioned to its own task force. But I would be happy to work with you for that as well, for this as well. If there is the need for just an open listening session or discussion session, we can definitely do that. That would be something really sort of fun for this. And a pre-survey would be a great way to get structured feedback. All right, we're coming up at time. There's one more minute. Not seeing anything pop into the Q&A though. I'll pause here and see if there's anything else from the usability subteam that you would like to share.
I think that covers everything for now. I want to thank all my sub-team members. I don't think Susannah introduced herself, but Susannah Broyles, she was the previous chair. She did a really great job and got a lot of this started. So make sure that he gets credit for this too. But yeah, look, thank you for your time today.
Thank you all, and thank you for being willing to share in the forum, but also provide a test instance for people to play around with and give comment back to. It takes a lot of courage to put stuff out and be open to feedback. So I appreciate that very much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up there, though. Not seeing any other questions coming through the Q&A. So yeah, thank you to everyone on the usability sub-team. This is really exciting, and I know that we're all eager to see what comes of this project, and look forward to hearing more about that soon in whatever channel we hear about that. But that's the end of today. We are done with our sessions for the day. We are halfway through the virtual member forum. I appreciate everyone who is still here, even if you came for just one presentation or if you stuck with us all day. I think it was all really great. We learned a lot, and I look forward to doing it again tomorrow. If you are interested in joining us again tomorrow and you have not registered for either of the sessions, make sure that you do that now. There's still plenty of time. Jamie just posted a link to the wiki. You can go ahead and register for whatever session you are available to attend, and I look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next ArchivesSpace event. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.